In the past year, we've had an opportunity to stand up for the rights of people of many liberal causes and many identities. I think everyone has something, an identity, a characteristic, a point of view that they feel is worthy of or in need of defending. At some point in your life, for something you are or something you believe or something you have said, I'm sure you've been put in a position of affirming or defending who you are. If you are a member of a dominant group, like cisgender men and women, the times you have to fight for the right to be who you are far fewer than those who are on the non-binary gender spectrum. I received from a 13-year-old this week, who is just a rock star of a kid, a diagram that explains the gender spectra in clear and simple ways to the adults who love her most. They're proud of her clarity, and yet still probably hoping that she is just going through a phase. It's a difficult matter for a young person whose parents want them to pursue a career or a direction that does not speak to that young person's passion. It is far worse for people whose parents want them to be something that they simply are not. This month is Gay Pride Month. This month we celebrate the lives and stories of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning, intersex, asexual people, members of the queer community who have to fight for their lives, fight for their identities, fight for their place in the world, or who have had to hide who they really are because they make cisgender heterosexuals uncomfortable. We who are liberal and progressive all have causes. Many are tied to our own identities. Sometimes, though, we can make the most difference when we stand up for someone else, when we are a witness to injustice and we speak up, when we are allies to the marginalized and the oppressed and say, I am here with you, when we are advocates for change and say, this has got to stop. Together, we can make a difference. Let us work for our causes until things change. Let us work for the cause of the LGBTQIA+ community. Let us worship together.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us for this morning's service celebrating queer pride. We light our chalice this morning with Living with Pride by Lori Gorgas Halben. If you have a chalice at home, you're invited to light it at this time. We light our chalice flame for those who lived in closets of shame, for those who furtively visited the bars where nobody knew your name, for the Stonewall riot and the fierce trans women who fought, for the plague, which still takes far too many, too young, too soon. So many gone, so many never lived to see. Out gay kids singing on TV, out gay people serving in the military, marriage equality, families formed by intention. We light our chalice flame for all of these, and for our siblings of the rainbow, surviving, living life out in the open with pride.
Today, collect the dazzling Collect the dazzling collect the shelter of floods, stitch us departed, large enough for the glow, fragrant enough for satellites to lift their noses. Take the prayer of the night into your arms as she sleeps. There are times when there is nothing left to do but create.
Form the unseen into a tangible communion of stardust. On your tongue, let your mouth be a wondrous glow. Your words have begun. When everything is lost, imagine yourself as more than an earthquaking body, a gift, the streaking tail of a comet. Become that which holds your own. Become that which makes you gasp.
Good morning. I am the Reverend Kikanza Nuri Robbins, and I welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Community Church of Santa Monica. Our church building and the homes of most of our members are on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded land of the Gabrielano Tongva people who lived here and cared for this land for thousands of years. This land was stolen from the Tongva by colonial settlers. We recognize and mourn the often deadly harm inflicted on the indigenous people of this country. We lift up their grace and resilience and their relationship with these sacred lands. Unitarian Universalism is not defined by creed or dogma, but is guided by principles that affirm the worth and dignity of every person and encourage an individual search for truth and meaning. We honor the wonder of existence, and we believe we are all connected to one another and to the interdependent web of life. Our beliefs are drawn from scripture and science, nature and philosophy, personal experience, and ancient tradition. We are a congregation made up of people who don't believe in a God, of people who do, people who are content to live with the mystery, and people who will never stop searching for answers. In Unitarian Universalism, you can bring your whole authentic self, all of your identities, your questioning mind, and your expanding heart. We are diverse in many ways, seen and unseen, and we are united in our advocacy for social justice, our covenants with one another. I hope you find our company and our conversation safe and welcoming. I hope you find this service inspiring and challenging, and I hope that you will come back and join us again. We are very glad to have you with us this morning. And if you would like to learn more about who we are in Santa Monica or about Unitarian Universalism in general, stay after the service and join us for our Zoom coffee hour. And there will be a small group, the Zoom Visitors Meetup, after the service where you can get to know some of us and one another and something more about Unitarian Universalism. Many people have contributed to this worship service. We are grateful to have so many talented and generous members. If the streaming through Facebook is a bit glitchy this morning, or you are distracted by the comments, watch the comments long enough to get directions and a link for you to watch the service on our YouTube site. After the service, watch again in the comment section to get the link for our Zoom coffee hour. We hope that you will join us. You will have an opportunity to talk with one another, to join small groups, small interest groups, and to talk with the Reverend Jeremiah Kalendae about the sermon. We have a wonderful, exciting announcement this morning, and that is that Judith Martin Straw is absolutely delighted to announce that her daughter, Sophia Martin Straw, has graduated from Culver City High School with a major in theater. And her sister, Olivia Martin Straw, will be graduating with honors from Santa Monica College with an associate's degree in animation. Olivia then will be going on to UC Santa Cruz to get her bachelor's degree starting in September. Congratulations to you both, Olivia and Sophia, and congratulations to your parents.
We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing for our lives. of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are queer and straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are queer and straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
El amor es la enseñanza de esta iglesia.
Love is the doctrine of this church.
Buscar la verdad es su sacramento y el servicio es la oración.
The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer.
Vivir juntos en paz.
To dwell together in peace.
Buscar el conocimiento en la libertad.
To seek knowledge in freedom.
Servir a la humanidad en comunión.
To serve humankind in fellowship.
Así es como convenimos unos a otros.
Thus do we covenant with each other.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung through every land by every tongue.
Good morning. So this week we're going to take a tiny break from our collective story, which I believe will be wrapping up next week. And we're going to talk a little bit about pride. Now, some of you may know what pride is. You might see rainbow advertisements this month. Even some of the cartoons you watch might have a celebratory episode or a short that you've seen on YouTube. But sometimes people don't really know what it is. Well, Pride, as we know it today, is a celebration in the month of June to celebrate LGBTQ people. It's a lot of words, right? So it stands for lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning. Again, a lot of words. But the long and the short of it is, it's a month to celebrate a bunch of people who didn't exactly always have all of their rights met. Now, specifically, Pride itself is in June because a really long time ago, in 1969, a group of people were being harassed simply because they wanted to have somewhere to be queer together and hang out. But that wasn't allowed for various interesting laws. And so the police were trying to enforce these very unjust laws, saying that people of a certain type couldn't congregate. So this happened for years and years and years, and eventually, and this is where the story gets murky, either a black male impersonator or a trans woman decided to throw a brick through a window outside of the Stonewall Inn, and that precipitated several days of unrest in the area around Stonewall, which is known as Christopher Street. Now, this happened in the 60s, and it was a pretty big deal at that point. Like, there wasn't the plethora of rainbows that there is today, right? But you know something interesting? While a lot of things did change, the city did take quite a bit of notice that they could no longer push around people just because they thought they could. The city decided that some of those laws maybe didn't need to be enforced, and even a few needed to be removed. But when people tell you that is the beginning of the movement, you, very, very smart person, get to tell them they're wrong. Because before that, here in California, in San Francisco, there was a place called Compton's Cafeteria, where a lot of gender nonconforming or trans or non-binary folks, all words we use today that they didn't have then, but would congregate there in the early morning hours, after, before work. This was the space where some people who couldn't live and look the way they wanted to normally chose to and were able to do safely. But again, the cops were like, yeah, you dressing like that's legal. Yeah, we don't think people like you are acceptable to have here out loud. And so, once again, gender nonconforming folks took exception to this behavior and started a riot. And subsequently, policing in the area, policing of people's clothing and identities and ability to congregate changed. It was quite interesting how a teeny tiny bit of pushback gets a lot done. But you can have an even more interesting story to tell when people go, well, Stonewall was the beginning of the movement. So before even Compton's Cafeteria, which is known as the riot at Compton's Cafeteria, there was a place called Cooper's Donuts here in Los Angeles, downtown near Pershing Square, which is where there's the big ice rink during winter. And again, it's a donut shop where mostly black and brown, gender nonconforming, trans or NB people would congregate after clubs, before work. This was their nighttime spot. And again, they were often harassed by police officers. And one night it got out of hand. A police officer put their hands on someone unnecessarily. And like Compton's Cafeteria and like Stonewall, those young queer people tore the place up. Surprisingly, you know, things changed. Policing lightened just a bit. Some laws began to change, not quickly, not necessarily overnight, but the precipitating events for Stonewall, for Compton's Cafeteria, for Cooper's Donuts, was unjust systems being upheld by people who've been given power by the unjust system, and the people being oppressed by those systems literally fighting back. And so that's why we celebrate. It's not rainbows for no reason. It's not parades for no reason. It's because quite literally, since the 1950s at Cooper's Donuts, and again in the 60s at Compton's Cafeteria, and then again in the late 60s at Stonewall, LGBTQ people have had to fight, quite literally, to simply exist without harassment. So that's why there's a parade. That's why Blue's Clues is wishing you a happy Pride. Because people are proud that they fought back and survived and thrived. And that's why there's rainbows everywhere. So, if you know people who don't know what Pride is, guess what? You get to give them a robust history now. And that's our conversation for today. See you next week.
Vernal clouds have turned the star wheel, summer is upon us. Vernal clouds have turned the star wheel, summer is upon us. Gliding are the hawks, hovering above the hot and yellow hillside. Vernal clouds have turned the star wheel, summer is upon us. Crickets in the night, chirping in our ears the sound of moonlit music. Vernal clouds have turned the star wheel, summer is upon us.
Let us enter into our time for introspection and prayer and mindfulness together. This morning's prayerful litany will be followed by time for dwelling in the beauty of silence. We share these words, "May we live in the spirit of pride," by Elizabeth Ketchman. You're invited to inwardly repeat or out loud, "May we live the spirit of pride," after each statement or affirmation. With gratitude for the freedom to be our true, authentic selves, may we live the spirit of pride. With the courage that comes from challenging fear, may we live the spirit of pride. With sorrow for those who could not be here today, and in honor of those who died of AIDS or who lost their lives, may we live the spirit of pride. With grief for those whose pain was unbearable and who left us too soon, may we live the spirit of pride. Looking ahead to the justice still withheld, may we live the spirit of pride. With the confidence that a sense of community banishes isolation and loneliness, may we live the spirit of pride. With the rainbow flag flying high, a sense of beloved community among us, and the joy that comes from making new connections, may we live the spirit of pride. Now let us meditate together in the beauty of silence for a few brief minutes. I will ring the singing bell to begin and end our time for silent meditation. Well, it is that time of the year again. It's a special time if you are queer or transgender, bisexual, intersex, lesbian, asexual, gay, or identify as a queer supporting ally, or even as a co-conspirator in the work to overthrow the white supremacist cis hetero patriarchy. You remember that system in which we all live and which has been around for a really long time, and that allocates power to some groups while disenfranchising and often brutally oppressing other groups. It's a system that values whiteness, gender binaries and conformity to those binaries, heterosexuality, and of course, being a male. Now, our liberal religious tradition, which includes people of all races, ethnicities, sexual orientations, and gender identities, has been pushing back against this system for centuries to create space for people to blossom and flourish in all of their beautiful differences. Pride is specifically meaningful to our liberal religious tradition because we've been at the table advocating for justice and inclusion for decades longer than any other major religious movement in this nation. Many of us were there in the old days, which really aren't the old days because they weren't that long ago, when systematic oppression, abuse, and exploitation of LGBTIAQ people was championed by virtually every sector of our society, from the churches to the schools to the hospitals to the corporate boardrooms to the city halls and, yes, the halls of Congress. Indeed, such violence still exists in our society and all around the globe, but we have made some progress. So we raise our rainbow flags this month to remember what has been, to celebrate what is, and to proclaim our joy in spite of it all. When I was a young person, the pride flag was a symbol of determination and defiance. It was rarely safe, even in the Midwest, to be too bold or out in those days. There were no flags for sale in the local stores. I remember one year finding a small rainbow ribbon, I think this was my senior year of high school, and pinning it to my shoulder bag so I wouldn't be completely consumed and erased by the pervading heteronormativity of society. Coming out, of course, meant possibly risking our lives, losing our families, and being shunned by our larger society. Queer people would have to carve out spaces where we could exist in coffee houses and clubs and bars and other family, that's chosen queer family establishments. Many queer people had to kind of move in and out of heteronormativity to survive, to hold down jobs, to access education, to find community, and to lead lives of meaning and purpose. Pride was the one time each year when queer people with enough privilege, and some without, could come together and be unabashedly ourselves, out loud and proud. It was like the annual meeting of queers that happened just once a year, usually in public, usually in a big city where there was already an established queer community, and it included parades, festivals, and parties to celebrate our lives and the centuries-long struggle for freedom. Drag queens and kings, leather daddies, butch and femme people of all genders, trans people, kink enthusiasts, motorcyclists, and others who were often marginalized and brutalized for the rest of the year took center stage, marshaled the troops and taught all of us what it meant to value the uniqueness of our lives for one weekend each year. We knew we would be mocked on television and in the newspapers the next day, and many would return to the closets and the pills and the torment. But we had a weekend that was ours, a weekend that could remind us of the power of community, of resistance, and of our survival against all odds. We celebrate Pride Month today because of our tenacity to persist in the face of overwhelming odds. The Ipsos 2021 LGBT plus Pride Global Survey found that more young people are identifying today as transgender or queer than ever before, and the vast majority of the American public now supports queer rights. Now, this poll surveyed 19,000 people in 27 countries. It concluded that Gen Z, that's young people up to the age of 24, are 4 times more likely to identify as transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming as compared to previous generations. It also found that while 87% of boomers, 84% of Generation Xers, and 78% of millennials identify as heterosexual, only 68% of Generation Z, or the Zoomers, identifies with heterosexuality. So 32% of the next generation identify somewhere on the multi-vector, multi-dimensional, remember, it's not a binary spectrum of queerness. 32%. Now, it's important to note, as one social media commentator, Mike, I guess, had so astutely observed, the lack of boomer LGBTIQ people isn't because it's more popular now. Many were murdered by their peers, died from government inaction during the AIDS crisis, committed suicide due to lack of social support, or had to live in the closet due to their peers' cruelty. So what we're seeing isn't necessarily a growth in total number of queer people in society, but rather the survival of queer people and their ability to embrace their identities and to live openly in society. Queer pride helped to create the spaciousness. We held the space for others to love and accept themselves, and for society to embrace all of its differences. And we're still holding that ground. Unitarian Universalism has been at the forefront of the movement for queer liberation since at least the revolutionary times of the 1960s. In this very church in Santa Monica, in greater Los Angeles, California, some of the very first queer marriages, now they probably weren't called that then, but we don't know, were performed in the 1950s by our late and straight, but progressive and open-hearted minister, the Reverend Ernie Pipes. In our tradition, heterosexual people led the fight for queer liberation alongside their oppressed peers. In 1969, the first queer minister came out, a member of our tradition, the Reverend James L. Stoll, and was subsequently fired and never served a congregation again, but was among the first to advance queer rights as a liberal religious priority. By 1970, This movement for justice and inclusion had grown so significantly in our churches that we passed by democratic vote of the representatives of all of our churches a resolution to end discrimination against gays, lesbians, and bisexuals. In 1971, we amended our Sunday school sexuality education programs to be inclusive of information about sexual orientation. In 1979, our tradition settled our first gay ministers, openly gay ministers, one of whom was the Reverend Mark Bellatini, who was responsible for our Singing the Living Tradition hymnal, and who many years later was the only minister that we could find to keynote my college's queer conference on gay marriage in the year 2001. By 1980, we voted at the national level to embrace LGBT religious leaders. In 1984, we moved to support queer unions across all of our congregations, and by 1996, gay marriage. In 1998, the first openly transgender person was ordained to the ministry, to our ministry. And in 2002, the first openly transgender person, my beloved colleague, the Reverend Sean Dennison, was called to a settled ministry. Moving forward in the timeline, in 2003, the UUA notes Massachusetts was the first U.S. state to legalize same-gender marriage without the decision being overturned. 7 of the 14 plaintiff couples that brought the suit against the state of Massachusetts identified as Unitarian Universalist. The first same-gender couple to get a marriage license in Massachusetts in May of 2004 was a UU couple, and it was issued by the UU city clerk. In 2007, we passed our first resolution in support of transgender people and affirmed inclusion of diverse gender identities in our religious life. Now, the moral of this story is our inclusive love was decades ahead of every other religious movement and virtually every other institution in our society. And we as Unitarian Universalists will celebrate that today, this month, and undoubtedly the generations that follow us will remember that Unitarian Universalists showed up and sided with love when almost no one else would. Queer liberation, not rainbow capitalism, has become one of the slogans of those who recognize that queer identity is being commodified and sold during Pride Month by interests that are really not truly invested in queer lives and who were nowhere to be found in the years when it wasn't socially acceptable or profitable to support our rights. The early queer rights movement was one with revolutionary aims that sought the dismantling of the cis-heteropatriarchy and more freedom for all kinds of people to create a better society. Bell Hooks explains, queer not as being about who you're having sex with, that can be a dimension of it, but queer as being about the self that is at odds with everything around it and has to invent and create and find a place to speak and to thrive and to live. End quote. There was a fear that when ending don't ask, don't tell in the military and the right to marriage became the battle cry of the movement, we would be sacrificing revolutionary queer ideals and alternative ways of living and building beloved community to instead advocate for conservative priorities and counter-revolutionary institutions like that of marriage. queer kind of gained acceptance as the moniker that represented the ideal that LGBTIAQ people would stand against conformity to heteronormativity and its oppressive societal institutions like the military, marriage, corporatism, and capitalism. Queer people, the people of the rainbow, had always dreamed of a society freed from the cis-hetero-patriarchal violence that we came to know all too well, and the prescribed and superficial roles, gendered or otherwise, we were told we had to perform, and those institutions based on ownership and the oppression of women, and an economic order that served the interests of only a segment of our human society. The queer identity is revolutionary, not only because of its radically progressive ideals, but also because it intersects with virtually all other identities. Queer people are temporarily able-bodied and disabled. We're refugees and native-born. We're well-off and we're living on the streets. We come in all colors, all genders, all ages, all nationalities, and all religions, and no religion. We cross all of the ordinary ways that human beings have found to divide themselves, and that reality has revolutionary potential if we can grasp and realize it. Queer people can be a thread of commonality and diversity that runs deeply through all of humanity. We have the power to help tear down the walls that divide us and build bridges between our diverse human communities. So let us celebrate Pride this year, after this long and tragic year of yet another deadly pandemic, not only to remember our past and those who have gone before us, but also to celebrate the freedoms we've won together and to remind ourselves that we're all still in the struggle to continue to expand hope, love, liberty, equality, and justice in our world. May it be so.
It is our practice at UUSM to dedicate half of our Sunday offering to an organization doing work in the world that advances our UU principles. This month, the offering goes to the Trans Latina Coalition. The Trans Latina Coalition was founded by a group of transgender, gender nonconforming, and intersex immigrant women to address the specific needs of TGI Latina immigrants who live in the United States. So we encourage you to donate to them donate to us so that we can donate to them. We also encourage you to give to the general fund for our church. We're not worshiping in our building yet, nor can any of the rooms on our campus be used by the many groups that have met here for years. So if you are able, and we know that some of you are not, please give generously. There are 3 ways to give: over text, through our website, or by mailing a check. If you're texting, use your smartphone, text the number that you see on the screen, 844-982-0209, with the donation amount and the code for where the funds will be posted. So if you're texting to give money to the Latina Coalition, make sure that you write the sum that you're contributing and then GCC, Generous Congregation Contribution. You can also use the QR code that you see on your screen. Your giving makes a big difference, and we thank you.
Mama told me when I was young, we were all born superstars. She rolled my hair and put my lipstick on in the glass of her boudoir.
There's nothing wrong with loving who you are, she said, 'cause he made you perfect, babe. So hold your head up, girl, and you'll go far. Listen to me when I say I'm beautiful in my way, 'cause God makes no mistakes. I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way. Don't hide yourself in regret, just love yourself and you're set. I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way. Ooh, there ain't no other way, baby, I was born this way. Baby, I was born this way. Ooh, there ain't no other way, baby, I was born this way. Baby, I was born this way.
Ooh. Give yourself prudence and love your friends. Subway kid, rejoice the truth. In the religion of the insecure, I must be myself, respect my youth.
A different lover is not a sin. Believe capital H-I-A.
Hey, hey, hey.
I love my life, I love this record, and mi amore volevo, yeah. I'm beautiful in my way, 'cause God makes no mistakes. I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way. Don't hide yourself in regret, just love yourself and you're set. I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way. Ooh, there ain't no other way, baby, I was born this way. Baby, I was born this way. Ooh, there ain't no other way, baby, I was born this way. Baby, I was born this way. Don't be a drag, just be a queen. Your black, white, beige, true medicine. Whether life's disabilities left you outcast or liberties. 'Cause baby, you were born this way. No matter gay, straight or bi, lesbian, transgender life, I'm on the right track. Baby, I was born to survive. No matter black, white or beige, chola or Asian made, I'm on the right track. Baby, I was born to be brave. I'm beautiful in my way, 'cause God makes no mistakes. I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way. Don't hide yourself in regret, just love yourself and you're set. I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way. Hey. Ooh, baby, I was born this way.
is little, love is more. Love will make our spirits grow, grow in peace, grow in light. Love will do the thing that's right. Grow in peace, grow in light. Love will do the thing that's right. Love is patient, love is kind. In love's flames our hearts refined. Trust in peace, trust in light. Love will do the thing that's right. Trust in peace, trust in light. Love will do the thing that's right. Love is tender, love is best. In love's arms our lives are blessed. Hope in peace, hope in light. Love will do the thing that's right. Hope in peace, hope in light. Love will do the thing that's right.
Go in peace and in pride. Hold fast to that which is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint of heart. Support the weak. Help the afflicted. Honor all beings. May you go and be blessed, and may you be a blessing.